everybody, I'm back with a new Lives of the Musicians story, and today we're going to learn about Brahms. Johannes Brahms, a German composer who wrote masterpieces in almost every form except opera, most famous for his 4 symphonies and lush piano music. Johannes Brahms did things other people might have wished they could do. He fell asleep once when composer Franz Liszt was playing the piano for him. That's another famous composer. He dressed strictly for comfort and he left his clothes on the floor when he went to bed, just like I do. He liked merry-go-rounds and circus sideshows, just like me. Not until he was almost 30 did he stop playing with tin soldiers. Brahms had not always been able to do what he wanted. He grew up in the slums of Germany, surrounded by crime and disease. His father, who was 17 years younger than his mother, was a bass player who worked in bars. At an early age, Brahms helped support his family by playing dance music in waterfront bars. He kept a book propped open on the piano so he could read while he played. And when he got sleepy, bartenders plied him with drinks to keep him awake. By the time he was 15, he was making a living through music. He left Hamburg to travel as an accompanist to a famous Hungarian violinist, carrying in his knapsack works of his own. Brahms was handsome when young, slender with long straw blonde hair, and he had a high voice that didn't change until he was 24. The foundation of his life was his friendship with Clara Schumann, who was 14 years older than he was. She advised him on matters large and small. On things musical, she gave him piano lessons. She did everything she possibly could to help his career, and he wrote most of his music with her in mind. He also gave 2 years of his life helping Clara and her children with housekeeping, childcare, and rearranging her library of books and music. They wrote hundreds of letters to each other, some of which were later destroyed. Brahms wasn't an instant success as a musician. At the first performance of a concerto, on which he'd worked for 4 years, only 3 people clapped. Everyone else hissed. That means booed. But eventually his music became popular, and he was one of the few composers who didn't have to take on another job to make a living. He was one musician who spent less money than he earned. With his extra money, Brahms took care of relatives in Hamburg and any friend who needed help. His own tastes were simple in everything but music and food. He owned an expensive collection of original music, manuscripts by Mozart and other composers he admired. And Brahms loved food. The main melody of his 3rd symphony came to him after a meal of fresh asparagus and champagne. When a doctor told him he had to go on a diet, he protested that he was dining with a composer that night and asked the doctor to pretend he hadn't come to see him until the next day so he could wait to go on his diet tomorrow. Another much-loved dish was herring, and he adored eggnog. His table manners were not the best. Brahms lived for 26 years in the same apartment, and every day he ate at the Red Hedgehog restaurant. Later in his life, people said Brahms, with his short legs and huge bushy beard, began to resemble a hedgehog himself. Before I had my beard, I looked like Clara Schumann's son, he said. Now with it, I look like her father. He wore flannel shirts and short baggy pants that often showed several inches of his underpants. Another way you could catch a glimpse of his underpants was to watch him conduct an orchestra. He sometimes forgot to fasten his suspenders, and when he conducted, he'd have to grab his pants before they fell down. He smoked cigars constantly. I know someone like that. And wore a shabby brown coat with cigar smudges all over it. He walked the way Beethoven did, with his hands behind his back. Brahms got up every morning at 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, made his own coffee, and went for a walk in the woods to hear the birds singing. He kept his pockets filled with candy and little pictures, which he handed to children on his walks. Then he would get to work. His first symphony took him about 10 years to write. He often sought advice from friends, and he made friends easily. He couldn't even tell the smallest lie. Brahms could be sarcastic and domineering too. The one friend he never alienated was Clara. Brahms never did marry. Perhaps he liked his freedom. Brahms lived less than a year after Clara Schumann died. At age 64, he died of cancer. All the ships in Hamburg lowered their flags to half-mast that day.